I want to welcome all of you, and the first thing I want to do is I want you to let's take a deep breath and sigh and be comfortable. There's nothing uptight about tonight's presentation. I'm really here for your benefit. I hope this is going to be a very worthwhile experience for you. And by way of my background, she mentioned that I was an attorney, and Linda and I did have a law firm called Barkacs, and I always tell people that her name came first. And our consulting group is called the Barkacs Group, and her name still comes first. But in any event, by virtue of being not just any kind of lawyer, but a trial lawyer, I'm used to having people interrupt me, tell me I'm wrong. This is mostly the judge. And in any event, I don't have any problem in the course of the evening with your raising your hand or challenging anything I say, because first and foremost, I want tonight to be worthwhile for you. Now, the topics that sort of headline this presentation, influence, power, and politics, are topics that I'm very passionate about, and they often result in people having a visceral reaction to them. And so I just sort of want to do an informal poll of the audience, and let me ask you this. Who in the workplace seeks power? By a show of hands. Okay. Some hesitation, now about half the room went up. Okay, who in the workplace plays politics? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. And again, not everyone raised their hand, but I hope by the end of the presentation that you will want to seek power in the workplace, and I hope that you'll understand the political game better and that you will, in fact, engage in the political process. Because when you hear power in politics, that can be very off-putting for people. And I think in the promo for this, we had that very famous quote by Plato, because the quote goes something like this: "Those who believe they're too smart for politics are condemned to being governed by those dumber than they are." And so if you aren't part of the political process, you're not part of the decision-making that takes place. And if you're interested in things like, developing relationships, if you're interested in establishing hierarchy to your advantage, so you're closer to the top and the bottom, if you're interested in how benefits get conferred or burdens get imposed, all that is a function of the political process. And this is true well in family politics. Hierarchies are established, relationships are developed, benefits are conferred, burdens are imposed. This is true, obviously, in governmental politics. We're seeing a lot of that recently. And it's also true in organizational politics. So again, if things like developing relationships, establishing hierarchy, the allocations of burden benefits are important to you, you need to have political skill. Now, and you also need to have power. And for those of you who didn't raise your hand, one of the things I like to do from an analytical standpoint is to assess something by inverting it. So if you're not seeking power, what is it you're seeking? And I don't imagine you're seeking to be powerless. But chances are, the power is competitive. People do seek it. There are allocations of power. And if you are not seeking it, chances are you won't have much. And others who are seeking will have it. And power is central to getting anything done. So although the topic, again, can be a little bit off-putting, the reality is that the political process is how decisions are made that affect you in a profound way. And establishing power is part of the political process. Now, let me ask you this question. What kinds of power do you think there are in the workplace? This is kind of open. What kind of power in the workplace? What did you say? Ego, okay. Money, okay. Soft power and hard power, okay. Expert power, that's good. Well, now, all your answers were good, and what I want to share with you is some research done by a couple of academics named French and Raven. Who's heard of French and Raven? Some of you? Okay, yeah. And they originally had 5 types of power, and they added a 6th, and we're going to add a couple more to that. But in any event, I think if you're going to pursue power, it's good to understand what kind of power is available. And in the workplace, generally, you have something called legitimate power. Legitimate power is organizational power, or organizational chart power. And so obviously where you are on the hierarchy gives you some type of legitimate or formal power just by rank or status. I think that's pretty clear. There is reward power. Obviously, the ability to give someone a raise or promote somebody or give them a favorable assignment, that's valuable. There's coercive power. That's the power to impose some kind of penalties or punishment or reprimand. And if you notice, the first three are rather linked. If you're high up on the organizational chart and you have legitimate power, with that comes reward power to make people's lives better, coercive power to let them know that there are consequences for substandard performance or if they're not doing things the way you want them to do. Then I heard somebody mention expert power. And any examples of expert power you can think of? What is that? Education degrees certainly will often give you some level of expertise. What's that? Longevity. Yep. That ties into another form of power. That might be expert power, but there's one other one that I think it captures a little better. And the example people like to use for expert power is when the computer system in the room goes, in the office goes down. Who's the most important person? Yeah, the IT person. They don't have a lot of formal power necessarily. They're not high up on the organizational chart, but no one's more important than the IT. They have expertise. But it's not just that field. So you can have power in the workplace by virtue of expertise. The next one's a little more interesting. It's called referent power. Anybody know what referent power is? Referent power is, for lack of a better term, is charismatic power in the best sense of the word. We probably all work with people that might not be high up in the organizational chart, but the way they carry themselves, the way they interact with other people, just the way they handle various situations, you just have respect for them. That's referent power. French and Raven then added another one. They called it information power, which is close to the expert power. That's where maybe you have power in the workplace by virtue of maybe having been there a long time. The proverbial know where all the bodies are buried, or know where, just know who does what. There's power in that. Another type of power, gotten very popular these days, network power. Now, what is your network like? Are you building your network in the organization? What people do you interact with? And then another type of power that Linda and I have added to this list, and it comes from some other sources, is centrality power. How central are you in the organization? And this is both from a knowledge standpoint or routing standpoint, what information flows through you, and also from actually a physical standpoint. Are you visible? FaceTime. So centrality. The reason I wanted to share those different types of power with you, and again, there are 8 of them. There's legitimate power, reward power, coercive power, expert power, referent power, information power, network power, and centrality power, is if you don't know what they are, how are you going to pursue them? And all of them are not just related to where you are in the organizational chart. I think legitimate power is rather visceral. We get that if you have a nice rank or status, you have power, but probably you've worked in organizations where people high up in the organizational chart might be so disrespected or ineffective that they don't really have other kinds of power. And I mentioned reward power, and I mentioned coercive power. If you're not high up in the organization, can you have reward power or coercive power? How so? I agree with you, by the way, yes. Oh, you said, oh, I'm sorry. I started, okay, you were throwing your voice, Carla. And there we go. There we go.
You might have a talent or skill that somebody other people want, so you can use that as a reward.
You can reward with performance, for sure. And coercive power, I think we know the flip side of that. You can punish with a lack of performance. And so the idea that, I'm not recommending these kinds of things, but understand the organizational setting. If morale is bad, motivation is low, the workforce itself can have coercive power by simply underperforming. And these things are always dynamic, they're always in play, and I would encourage you to take stock of where you are in an organization, and to the extent you can cultivate these other types of power, that you seek them. Now, I also know that these are often sought through the political process. And the expression, such and such plays politics, is meant as an insult. I don't like such and such. They're always playing politics. And politics sort of has this, a lot of baggage associated with it. But politics are inevitable. And as I'm fond of saying, politics enter the room with a second person, especially when you look at whether how benefits are conferred or burdens are imposed, or again, how hierarchy is established or how relationships are developed. That's all part of the political process. And people seeking power, you know what they want from you? They want you to hate politics. They want you to hate playing politics in the workplace, because that way you're out of the game, and they have a better chance to consolidate power for themselves. And the reason another reason I'm passionate about this topic is because among the many courses I teach are courses on ethics. And in Power and Politics, one of the books we read is Machiavelli's The Prince. And for those of you who might know the modern day Robert Greene, we take a look at Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. These are about as cutthroat and as underhanded as you can get. So you can imagine someone teaches a class on business ethics, teaching a class on power and politics. I mean, there's sort of this dissonance that occurs. But I'm going to try to reconcile this for your consideration. If you accept the notion or the premise that political activity is inevitable, and I think that's hard to refute, and that's how power gets allocated, the very different types of power get allocated, it's important that ethical people pursue power. And I think a lot of ethical people take themselves out of the game. I'm not going to say this would ever happen in the real world, like let's say in the United States, but it would be possible. You might have people running for the highest office in the land and have the electorate look at these people and think that maybe these aren't the best people for the position. Again, I'm not saying that would ever happen in our country, but theoretically, and this is no one side or the other. But I think we all would like to see people that we respect in positions of power. And that might be you. And if you don't understand the different types of power, and you don't know how to play the political game, then you're less likely to obtain that power. Now, one of the ways we achieve power is through influence. And by show of hands, this should be a lot of people in here because I have a lot of former students. Who's familiar with Robert Cialdini? Yes, okay. He is the guru on influence. He's out of Arizona State University. He's now professor emeritus. And I like to put Cialdini in perspective this way. We looked into having Robert Cialdini come to campus to speak just like this. And he's a big deal. I mean, he's purportedly the most cited social psychologist on influence in the world today. And he won an honorarium, no great surprise. He has best-selling books, well-known, lots of high-powered corporate clients. And I think we can all agree for an hour presentation that $5,000 is good and $10,000 is better. But we were not prepared to pay, as some of you heard before, the $25,000 he gets paid for an hour presentation. And companies pay it like that. And the reason they pay it like that is because when you can increase your influence, whether in making deals or making the deal better or in revenue generation or whatever the circumstances might be, obviously that improves the bottom line. And I will tell you, I'm going to jump ahead and then I'll come back, but Robert Cialdini's 6 methods of influence, and I guess I'll ask people in here. First of all, what's the acronym, people in here? I know you know. CRISPALS, very good. Okay, so I'm going to ask people. We did CRISPALS, didn't we, in the negotiation class? We did. You forgot. Okay, you're Nancy, you're coming back. Okay, you're coming back for sure. But CRISPALS is an acronym. It's like Roy G. Biv, for the rainbow. And so CRISPALS, the way it works is you write the word CRISPALS and you take the I and you circle the SP. Now you have 6 things. And Cialdini has studied influence and how people are influenced. And he said that there's actually 7. One way you influence people, we all know. You convince them that it's in their best interest. Well, that's easy. No, I mean, he stipulates to that. Page 3 or 4 of his book, which is, I think, right. He has several, but let's see. I like, here's his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And he stipulates early on, I think, on a footnote that, well, we know self-interest works. But there's 6 other ways, and then if you take CRISPALS and you have the first letters, the C stands for consistency and commitment. The R stands for reciprocity. The SP is 1, stands for social proof. The A stands for authority or expertise. The L stands for likability. They've studied likability, by the way. You know who we like? We like people that are similar to us. Birds of a feather flock together. We like people who compliment us. Okay? We're suckers for compliments. We like flattery. Not everybody, of course, and we like people who work in a cooperative effort. And again, if you doubt that, I always like to invert it once again. How well do you like people with whom you have nothing in common, that insult you and you can't get along with? Okay, so kind of makes sense. And the last one, the S, the last one is scarcity. And while I'm not going to go through all of them like I often do because we have a much more limited time today, I'm going to just tell you a story on how Cialdini teases out scarcity. Cialdini had a student, a PhD student, whose name was Amran Nichinsky. Amran Nichinsky. I did not know that. I'll tell you how I know that's kind of fascinating. And this PhD student had a beef import business. And he decided he wanted to use Cialdini's methods of influence in order to maybe improve revenue for his beef import business. So he went back to his sales staff and he told everyone there, he said, look, I want you to divide your client base into thirds. And for the first third, I want you to call them up and explain how we have this beef coming in from Australia. Certain quality, certain delivery date, just ask them how much they want, and we'll see how much we sell. 10 carloads. Then they decided to add scarcity to the mix. And they called people up, said, we have this beef from Australia, certain quality, certain delivery date. And by the way, we understand there's going to be a shortage of this beef from Australia. How much would you like? The middle third, 10 carloads, 24 carloads. For the third group, they called them up and said, we have this beef coming in from Australia, certain delivery dates, certain quality. We understand there's going to be a shortage of this beef. And oh, by the way, this information comes to us from our exclusive sources in the Australian Weather Service. True. And Cialdini said this was the scarcity double whammy, wasn't it? Not only was the beef scarce, but the information that beef was scarce was scarce. Okay, so the first group, 10 carloads. Second group, 24 carloads. Third group, 61 carloads. It was all true. And it was all true. Now here's where the story gets interesting. I'm going to share with you something you've not heard from me before, because I mentioned this Amran Nichinsky, who was this PhD student who did this. Well, some of you may know, this is going to sound like I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm not. Seaport Village is right now is going to, the lease is going to expire, and they're looking to redevelop it. And Linda and I live downtown. We decided to go over to the convention center to look at these 6 different proposals. And we're talking to this young man, and it turns out that he's with this company that has a $1.2 billion proposal. And it turns out that he went to Kellogg for his MBA, and he knows some of the people that we know at Kellogg, Linda and I know, that teach there. And then he proceeded to say that his father actually, we mentioned how we teach negotiation, and we mentioned we talk about Cialdini. He goes, oh, my father was a PhD student at Arizona State University, and Robert Cialdini was on his PhD board. And then overwalks his father, Amran Nichinsky, this person who I just told you, 10 carloads, 24 carloads, 61 carloads. And now I'm guessing he did well, given that he is in the running for a $1.2 billion project for his development company down in Seaport Village. But the story goes on beyond that. Turns out that because he knew Cialdini personally, he knew the story where Cialdini was sitting in a restaurant with someone, and someone comes by and said, who was calling him, Linda? Yes, you know, the multi-millionaire, Warren Buffett, yes. And someone said, Warren Buffett is on the phone for you. And he thought it was a joke. And they said, no, it's really Warren Buffett. And finally, he takes the call. And it was, in fact, Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett said to Robert Cialdini, he said, I just had to call you because we studied what you did. I think they did a workshop with him, and we have made millions and millions of dollars on what we learned from you, and we want you to know that. And he was asking then Warren Buffett was asking him to take a position at Stanford, which he ultimately did not do. And then he gave him, I think, a single share of stock, one share of privately held stock worth $200,000. Now, I share that with you because these techniques are real, and they're out there, and you sit there and think, well, gee, I mean, if people know them, they'll, maybe they won't work. Well, first of all, people don't know them. And so to the extent you're interested in being more influential, there's ways to actually study and become more influential. You know what Cialdini says about himself? And nobody knows the 6 methods of influence better than Robert Cialdini. He is the expert. He says he's the world's biggest patsy. And in fact, just another quick story on Cialdini himself. Now remember, this is the leading authority on influence in the world. This is a story he tells on himself. He was walking across the campus at Arizona State University. A young boy in a Boy Scout uniform approaches him. And he says, hey, mister, the Boy Scout circus is going to be on campus. Would you like to buy a ticket? It's $5. And Cialdini said, no, thanks, kid. And before he could leave, he said, well, if you won't do that, how about a couple of chocolate bars? They're only $1 a piece. And Cialdini bought 2. And he said he knew immediately something interesting had happened because he said he likes dollars and he doesn't like chocolate. And this kid he just met got him to exchange the dollars he liked for the chocolate that he didn't. So I said he went back to his office and he called in his teaching assistants. He said they quickly devoured the evidence. They ate the chocolate. And they decided, well, can we replicate this on the streets of Phoenix? So they decided to go out and they approached passersby and they said, well, we're going to approach a passerby and ask a large favor. And they said, hi, we're with the Juvenile Delinquent Center. We deal with at-risk youth. Would you agree to take a group of juvenile delinquents on a day trip to the zoo? Now, I don't know about you, but when I've got free time, I'm not thinking, and we have a great zoo in San Diego. I'm not thinking, hey, Linda, maybe we could find some juvenile delinquents. No, I'm not thinking that. But amazingly, and these are, I guess, very good-hearted people, 17% said yes. 17% said yes. So then, round 2 of the experiment, they approached passersby, and this time they decided to ask for even a larger favor, begin with a larger favor. They said, hi, we're from the Juvenile Delinquent Center. We deal with at-risk youth. Would you agree to be a big brother or a big sister to an at-risk youth? It would require a 3-hour commitment once a week for the next 2 years. Cialdini said, people reacted. 2 years? I don't even know where I'm going to be in 2 years. Then, taking their cue from the Boy Scout. Well, if you won't do that, would you agree to take a group of juvenile delinquents on a day trip to the zoo? Compliance was 17%. Round 2, 51%. So again, I mentioned the 6 different methods of influence, and I gave you the real-world example of the gentleman, Amran Nichinsky, the PhD student, increased he increased his effectiveness by a magnitude of 6. This other one was that was on scarcity, and this one with the day trip to the zoo increased by a magnitude of 3. And by the way, I'll ask you, what was operating in the example with the at-risk youth? What method of influence? What do you suppose was operating? Reciprocity was operating. This is like in negotiation. There's things a lot of people don't know about negotiation. First of all, that it is highly advantageous to make the first offer. There's conventional wisdom out. Anyone who's taken my negotiation classes knows this is true. Lynn and I prove this from the outset. We have an example we run. But there's conventional wisdom. 3 out of 4 executives think you shouldn't make the first offer. And there is no research to support that whatsoever. In fact, the classes we run, we establish early on how powerful. Not always. In human interaction, the people taking juvenile delinquents go from 70% to 100%. In human interaction, nothing is, people are complicated. It's nuanced. But overwhelmingly, it's powerful. But for example, people don't know that they should make the first offer. Now, let's go back to the example. When you make the first offer, it's called an anchor. And what happens, that becomes the frame of reference as to whether you got a good deal or not. And you like to say, by the way, do car dealerships anchor? Yeah, what's it called? Yeah, the sticker price. And then you say, I got I got them to move off that, I got a good deal. Well, that's not a good deal if you moved them off $2,000, they would have come down $6,000. But it becomes the frame of reference. What happened with the Boy Scout case and what happened with the day trip to the zoo case was someone anchored first. We do this great big thing. Will you take a group of juvenile delinquents? Will you become a big brother or big sister? And Cialdini said, when someone says no to you, when you anchor first and someone says no to you, that's a moment of power. Most people hate the word no. First of all, people are afraid to say anchor, go first. And then if someone says no, they shut down. They walk away. I'm embarrassed and like this. And You know that, and that's and Cialdini said that here's the heuristic: if you retreat in the situation and have a follow-up request, you win. If you retreat from the situation, like most people, and say no, you lose. And what was happening with the Boy Scout, hey, would you buy a ticket for $5? No. Okay, how about a couple of candy bars? They're $1 a piece, $2. He retreated into the situation. He heard the word no and made a smaller request. Hey, would you be a big brother or big sister for a 2-year commitment? No. Okay, how about a day trip to the zoo? What's operating there is reciprocity. First of all, you want to make a first offer. You want to make a first offer, by the way, that has a reason behind it, some legitimacy behind it. If someone says no, when you move from it and you are willing to make a concession is a gift, psychologically speaking. And when you know this, when you enter into a negotiation, you shouldn't be afraid to make a first offer. Article just came out of Harvard's program on negotiation. I have it behind me, 5 feet behind me. They talk about powerful negotiators overwhelmingly make the first offer. Yet the conventional wisdom, 3 out of 4 executives think you don't. And then what do you do if you make the first offer and they say no? Okay, well then if you stay in the moment and you say, how about this? There's a greater likelihood they'll say yes. And you all know this, and this is an example I use. You know this from when you were teenagers. You were better because of what happened when you were teenagers. Some of you heard this one. Hey, Mom, Dad, can I have like a crazy wild party this weekend? No, you can't do that. Well, can I borrow the car? Okay. Completely the same concept, okay? So you want to know what different kinds of power there are. We mentioned the 8 different kinds of things. You want to know the different kinds of methods of influence are. We mentioned the 6 things beyond self-interest. And by the way, a political skill comes down to, let's see if I can get this one right. A political skill comes down to parent sincerity. People have to believe you're sincere. It comes down to interpersonal influence, social astuteness, and networking ability. Those 4 things, okay? So I actually have a test that we give people that measures your social astuteness and your interpersonal influence and your networking ability and your apparent sincerity, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things that help you be more effective politically. I want you to know what kind of power is available, and I want you to know different types of influence. Now, what I just covered is an overview of what gets taught in the MBA program in 2 3-unit classes, 90 contact hours. Okay, so if I was talking fast, I did not cover all 90 hours. I think I only got to about 37 because I know I do talk quickly, part of my passion for it. But I'm going to stop there. Oh, yes, and?
Would you comment how many hours within MSGL and MSEL?
Excellent point. In the MSEL program, I know the Power and Politics, which they don't have any teaching yet. No, I'm just kidding. They have two great professors, actually. And one guy started this class. His name's Steve Staniford. He's now a dean at Butler University. And Michael Mack, who's a very successful CEO, teach together. They do a great job. 19 hours. And then the negotiation class and the MSEL is 19 hours. In the MSGL program, by student demand, even though that's a blended program, they just restructured it so there's 2 times you're on campus with the MSGO program when everyone's on campus because some people are distance learners. And it's the first week and the last week. Well, they have 12 hours of negotiation the first week, and they then have another 12 hours of negotiation the last week. So there's 24 hours in the MSGO program. And I got that right? Okay. And yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Any questions, comments, any thoughts you have? Heckling, yes.
Deal talks all the time about making great deals. From a neutral standpoint, what is kind of your take on truthfulness, legitimacy, great, or of what we hear?
First of all, it's hard for me to imagine answering that question in a way that I won't make half the room very upset. Okay, so
It's not political.
no. But I was anticipating this, okay, because I'm a former trial lawyer. You never know what's going to happen, Okay, so I actually have a response from somebody else to answer that question. And in the Power and Politics class I teach, this is my, I have some props here. By the way, I always joke with people, is there anyone who does not have enough PowerPoint in their life? Okay? And I have colleagues that use PowerPoint brilliantly. I've seen brilliant PowerPoint presentations, but I will just mention this book here, Real Leaders Don't Do PowerPoint. Okay. Although even this guy, Christopher Witt, says, except when they do. There's times for sure. When you have graphs and charts, and when it's done well. But that's kind of a fun book. But anyway, in the Power and Politics class, we read Machiavelli's The Prince. We read the influence book that I showed you a minute ago, and we read a book by Jeffrey Pfeffer. Pfeffer's book's right here, out of Stanford. Jeffrey Pfeffer, called Power. And he's the guru on organizational dynamics, probably. He's to organizational dynamics what Cialdini's the influence, Jeffrey Pfeffer. Now, getting to your question, I'm not avoiding this. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's up here, no wonder. Jeffrey Pfeffer, I'm so glad you asked this question. In 2014, before we knew Donald Trump was running for president, Jeffrey Pfeffer, who was the guy from Stanford, wrote this. It says, everything we bash Donald Trump for is actually what we seek in leaders. Okay? And you should know Pfeffer he has a harsh view of most leadership books. And basically he said most leadership books should be stamped with the warning, reading this material could be hazardous to your professional development. And we like to think we like leaders that are humble and altruistic and, well, what he calls the kumbaya academic theory of leadership. We like to think that. And we also like to think in something called what's called the just world hypothesis. And the just world hypothesis is good is rewarded, evil is punished. And he says that's not true. And by the way, there's even is there a gender distinction with the just world hypothesis? And what is that? Yes, women more than men tend to think the world is a meritocracy. And if they do well, they'll be recognized and rewarded and moved up. And I will quote from a now deceased former partner at a law firm I was with many years ago, over 20 years ago, who said this about female attorneys. I love to hire female attorneys. They're smarter, they work harder, you can pay them less. Not exactly a meritocracy, okay? But in any event, some of the quotes from this article. Again, 2014, he said, Pfeffer wrote this about Trump. He said, we disapprove of Trump because of self-promotion, disdain for facts, and unapologetic persona. He said, a topic that's vitally important to individuals who want to thrive in today's intensely competitive work world. The enormous disconnect between leadership prescriptions regularly offered to an unsuspecting public by the enormous leadership industry, and what social science and everyday observation suggests is the best path to individual success. Trump actually embodies many of the leadership qualities that cause people to succeed, albeit they are pretty much the opposite of what leadership experts tout. Donald Trump puts his name on everything, including his buildings, and touts his success at every opportunity. Behavior that contradicts both the common sense belief that we prefer people who don't self-promote, and research that best-selling author Jim Collins published in Good to Great. Numerous studies show that narcissism, not modesty, and self-confident, even overconfident self-presentation lead to leadership roles. There's also the exposure effect. And even though we say we want people who don't self-aggrandize, we secretly like the confident, overbearing people because they provide us with confidence. Emotions are contagious and also present themselves like winners. Trump also takes liberty with the facts. No, he did not write the best-selling business book of all time as he claimed. And some aspects of his business acumen and success are clearly exaggerated. After all, the Trump-named casinos went into bankruptcy. No matter. Telling the truth is an overrated quality for leaders. Leaders lie with more frequency and skill than others. Now, this gets deep into the class in the Power and Politics and the Machiavelli. And I will now cycle back to the role of ethics. I teach ethics. There's no question according to social science and studies, that people with the characteristics just described often get to leadership positions. That's not the same as necessarily being a good leader, but people do react to that, and we're actually seeing people react to that. So that sort of explains that phenomenon. But this is going to occur anyway, and to the extent power, influence, and money are, to the extent those are inevitable, they're amoral. They're neither good nor bad. And our society tends to reward people who pursue those things in some of the ways that Pfeffer described in his article, which would account for perhaps a lot of the success that he's achieved. Am I walking a tightrope here? I'm trying to. Okay, phew. But I'm just trying to share with you the social science. And what's important about the power and politics class, for you to be empowered. The worst thing that can happen is to, and I run into tension with other very revered, respected members of the faculty at USD on this point. While I love the kumbaya aspect of leadership, and I'm all in favor of, when possible, hugging our way to a better world, I like that too. That's not the whole story. And if you think the world's a meritocracy, and you're mistaken. And if you think, that good is going to triumph and evil is going to be punished, it's just not the way it works. And what studies show, and this actually goes to this engagement index, is that political skill matters more than intelligence and performance. And you need to have political skill. And I want ethical people to put themselves in the game and understand how the game is played. And even as Pfeffer says, once you hear how the game is played, you might think, I don't want to play the game anymore. Okay? But to the extent that the power is going to be allocated anyway, and it is, the best thing that can happen for people who maybe don't have the most endearing qualities is for good people like probably many of you in these audience to disengage. And speaking of engage, I'll go back to the engagement index. You've all heard the studies. What percentage of the workplace is engaged? 30%. What percent is not engaged? 52%. Okay, what's the other 18%? What are they? They are actively disengaged. What does that mean? They're out to sabotage the company. And so, what that shows probably is that what you probably understandably dislike is bad politics, unethical politics, people maybe with not a lot of scruples having good political skill. But politics, influence, money, they're amoral. They can be used for good things and bad things. And the ethical pitch I make in my class is, look, I want ethical, high-performing, smart people to play the political game so you can be in positions of authority and power. And so maybe more than 30% of the workforce will be engaged, and 18% won't be out to do the company in. And so what it does show, if there's that level of dissatisfaction and low performance, is that there's probably people in charge or running the show that really aren't benefiting the organization in a way that higher percentages would be the case if maybe some of you were in charge. And I happen to know this man right here, Captain Michael Laurie, Escondido Police Department, is one of the good ones. Okay, so it's nice to see good people at the top. So I'm sure there's other ones in the room. But I suspect, I will ask you, Captain Laurie, perhaps you've seen people attain positions more through political skill than performance? Yeah. Okay. Great question. Other thoughts, comments, and I don't know, time-wise, Kate? Sure. Yeah. I enjoy this topic. Maybe you can tell, I don't know. Yes, please. Carla.
The awareness of certain strategies when I went through the class, which is helpful. So you may, lead with the scarcity, being altruistic. You're not out to use these techniques in a malignant way. And then maybe you throw in a little reciprocity, but at the end of the day, they do work. And like the example you gave in class, if someone loans you a lawnmower or whatever, don't say no problem. Don't throw it away. Say, oh, I know you'd do that for me the next time or something.
Yeah, Charles Dini makes that point. 2 moments of power he talks about when people say no to you, that's a moment of power if you say in the moment. make a smaller request. Another one when someone says thank you, and what Cialdini points out is that people throw away that moment because a common responses to thank you are, it's nothing, no problem, my pleasure. And that undercuts a psychological obligation to return the favor. And as Cialdini points out, reciprocity is mostly a good thing. And I'll give you the workplace example. Imagine, I want you to envision someone that you work with in your organization that is, they're always there for you. They really come through in the pinch. I hope you all will have at least one person. I hope you have lots of people, but imagine someone like that in the organization. They're there for you. They've done for you. And now that person comes to you and asks you for a favor. Your response? Right. You're almost eager. That's the good side of reciprocity. Again, influence, power, money, politics, they're amoral. They're used for some rotten stuff, but they can be used for good stuff. And I'm glad Carla raised that point, because I want you to be on guard against the unethical use of these techniques, but I want you to use them ethically. And we really emphasize that. And, just a very quick one, another nice little matrix here. If you think about, the con artist on one end, to use these things as unethically as possible, and you think about the ethical persuader over here, I hope you know some of them. But this chart, there's motive, method, and perspective. The con artist, their motivation is malicious. Their method is deception, misinformation. Their perspective is immediate gratification, their own. And they use all these techniques for malicious reasons. They'll be deceptive and for their own gratification. The ethical persuader over here, their motive typically is a socially or organizationally beneficial one. They want to do something good. That's their motivation. Their method is accurate information. And their perspective is the long view, building trust and relationships. And these 6 techniques we talked about, they're used by con artists all the time, very effectively. But they're also used by people who are ethical. But if you don't know what they are, you're likely to fall prey to people who are using them on you unethically. And you're probably less effective because you don't know them to use them ethically. And this stuff is, thank you, Carl, because this stuff is very real. And the research is unequivocal. It's highly beneficial. One more? Yes.
Can you give us some ideas of people that we would all know that you would say would be a good mentor in this area? That we should look to and say, this is the type of person that.
Yes, I can answer that question. And Chris is just going to love me for this. All the faculty members in the MSGL and MSEL of class. Chris, okay, there we go. Okay. And on that note, I think we're probably ready to relax and chat. Okay, thank you.